How's everybody doing? Great to be learning with you on a Wednesday, Yom Revi'i. Let's light up the darkness. Who's in the house? Steven in New Hampshire, Sharon in New Jersey. Come on, Facebook. Bill in mid-Missouri, Ryan in Jacksonville, Paul in the Great Northwest, Joe in the Inland Empire, Melissa in Great Neck, Guy in Ohio, Aoife in Florida, Marjorie in Georgia. Welcome, everybody. Our daf is page 35, Lamed Hey. Here in Tractate Bava, the 22nd volume of the Talmud, we are continuing our discussion of Mishnah number 1 in chapter 3. So Rav Huna says, even if the Bailey declares his intention to pay for the deposit, right? So this Mishnah covers this situation where you deposit an item with an unpaid Bailey, so he's doing you a favor, watching your item, and then when you come to get it back, so it's gone. Now, the only way that an unpaid Bailey is going to be liable for replacing that item is if he was outright negligent in taking care of it. And as we'll see today, one form of negligence is, you know what, I forgot where I put it. I don't know where it is. That would be negligent. But if it was lost or stolen in a different manner, as an unpaid Bailey, he would not be liable to pay. However, he would have to swear an oath that he was not negligent and that it is no longer in his possession. He's not keeping it for himself. Some people would rather not swear an oath, so they would just pay for the item in place of swearing the oath. They don't need to pay, but rather than swear an oath, they would pay. That's what our Mishnah is talking about. So now Rav Huna says, even if the Bailey declares his intention to pay for the deposit, now as opposed to just paying, he says, I'm going to pay. Now he's going to do that instead of swear an oath. He hasn't actually paid yet, and yesterday we were talking about that in some situations. At that point, his obligation to pay kicks in, and therefore, if the item was stolen and then it was recovered, and the thief is caught and he has to pay the double payment. So that we had the question, well, if the double payment now comes in from the thief, who gets it? Certainly, if the Bailey paid for the deposit that was stolen rather than swear an oath, then at that point, the double payment would go to the Bailey. What about if he only said he's going to pay, but he hasn't paid yet? Right, so Rav Huna says, even if the Bailey declares his intention to pay for the deposit, the court administers an oath to him that the item was actually stolen or lost and is not in his possession. Now, he didn't want to swear an oath. Why are we going to make him swear an oath? Because even if he's swearing an oath that he was not negligent and he'd rather pay, we're still going to impose one of the other oaths on him, meaning that he's not actually holding it right now. And what is the reason for this oath? We are concerned that perhaps he coveted the item. And that's why he said, listen, I don't want to swear an oath that it's gone, I'll just pay. Now, the one who deposited the item with him maybe was saying, please guard it for me while I'm out of town, but he's unwilling to sell it to him. And so since this Bailey is unable to purchase it, maybe he's going to say that it was stolen or lost and pay rather than swear an oath so that he can keep it for himself. He was willing to purchase it, but it wasn't for sale. to make sure that he's not going to take this roundabout way of purchasing something that was not for sale, we make him swear an oath that it is not in his possession. At this point, right, he doesn't want to swear an oath that he was not negligent because perhaps he's not sure whether he was negligent or not, but he is sure that it's not in his possession, so he might still pay rather than take an oath that he was not negligent, even though it's going to come with swearing an oath that it is not in his possession. The Gemara, and by the way, we're at the bottom, we're near the bottom of page 34b, though our page today is 35. The Gemara raises an objection from a Mishna in Tractate Shavuos, page 43a. We're going to study this Mishna for a little while. In the case of one who lends money to another on the basis of collateral, and the collateral was lost, right? So if I lend you $100 and I'm not willing to lend you $100 unless you deposit some collateral with me. So let's say you say, okay, Sal, I have a leather jacket. It's worth $100. You can hold on to my leather jacket while I borrow the money. And when I pay it back, you'll give me the jacket back, right? That's collateral. And in case you never pay me back, then I would keep the jacket. So you can see how me holding your collateral, not pledging collateral that I could seize if you don't pay me back, but rather giving me the collateral to hold on to until you pay back the loan. And that, of course, is going to share certain aspects of the law with a deposit. I'm holding it as collateral, but the bottom line is it's your jacket. I'm holding it until you pay back the loan. What if it turns out that the collateral is worth less than the loan? What if it's worth more than the loan? What if the collateral is lost? What if the collateral is stolen? That's how there's going to be intersection between the law of deposits and the law of collateral. So in the case of one who lends money to another on the basis of collateral, and the collateral was lost, and the creditor, right, the lender, says to the debtor, we're going to talk about creditors and debtors because that's the way it's written here. I prefer lender and borrower. I feel like it's clearer. But okay, the creditor is the lender and the debtor is the borrower. And the creditor says to the debtor, I lended you a sella on the basis of that collateral, and the collateral was worth only a shekel, which is half a sella. So therefore, you owe me a shekel. And the other individual, the debtor, says in response to that claim, that is not the case. Rather, you lended me a sella on the basis of that collateral, and the collateral was worth a sella. So I owe you nothing. So in this case, the debtor is exempt from payment, meaning, let's say I lend you $100, you gave me a jacket worth $100 to hold. I lose the jacket. It's your jacket. I lost it. So now the $100 that you owe me, because I lent it to you, you don't have to pay me because I lost your jacket, right? So this is it's as if I purchased your jacket for $100. That wasn't the agreement. I was holding it as collateral, but I foolishly lost the collateral. So assuming that the loan and the collateral are actually equivalent in value, the simple unwinding of this is that you don't pay me back the loan. Now the Mishnah continues. If the creditor claimed, I lended you a sella on the basis of collateral that is worth a shekel. If I lend you $100 and it turns out that this jacket that you gave me as collateral is only worth $50, that's what we're talking about. And it was worth a shekel. And the other individual, the debtor, says that is not the case. Rather, you lended me a sella on the basis of that collateral, and the collateral was worth 3 dinars, i.e. 3/4 of a sella. So in this case, the debtor is obligated to take an oath due to the fact that he responded to the claim of the creditor with a partial admission. Right? You admit that the collateral is worth less than the loan, but not as much less as I claim it is. So that's a partial admission. Now, and then when you have a partial admission in a monetary matter, the court can obligate you to swear an oath. So the Mishnah continues, if the debtor said, you lended me a sella on the basis of that collateral, and the collateral is worth 2 sella, so now you owe me a sella. And the other party, meaning the creditor, said, that is not the case. Rather, I lended you a sella on the basis of that collateral, and the collateral was worth a sella. So here the creditor is exempt. If the debtor said, you lended me a sella on the basis of that collateral, and the collateral was worth 2 sella, and the other party, i.e. the creditor, said, that is not the case. Rather, I lended you a sella on the basis of that collateral, and the collateral was worth 5 dinars. Here, the creditor is obligated to take an oath due to the fact that he responded to the claim of the debtor with a partial admission, right? In other words, I lent you $100. You left me a jacket as collateral. Let's say the collateral is worth $125. I lost the jacket. Now, you don't owe me the original 100 because I lost the collateral. But if the collateral was worth more than the loan and I lost it while it was in my possession, then I have to make up the difference. I would then owe you $25. See how this works? If the debtor said, you lended me a sella on the basis of that collateral, and the collateral was worth 2 sella, and the creditor said that is not the case, rather, I loaned you a sella on the basis of the collateral, and the collateral was worth 5 dinars, here the creditor is obligated to take an oath due to the fact that he responded to the claim of the debtor with a partial admission. So the Mishnah concludes, who takes the oath? The one in whose possession the deposit was located. So this is the creditor who was holding the collateral. And the sages instituted this provision lest this party, the debtor, take an oath, and the other party, i.e. the creditor, produce the deposit and prove that the oath was false. So the Gemara clarifies the Mishnah. To which case in the Mishnah is this law referring? If we say it is referring to the latter clause of this Mishnah, where the debtor claims that the creditor owes him money because the collateral that was lost is worth more than the loan, so the Mishnah's explanation is unnecessary. Derive that the obligation to take the oath is incumbent upon the creditor due to the fact that he admits to part of the debtor's claim, which renders one obligated to take an oath by Torah law. So rather, Shmuel says this law is referring to the first clause of the Mishnah. And the Gemara explains, what is the meaning of Shmuel's statement that the law is referring to the first clause of the Mishnah? It is referring to the latter part of the first clause. The creditor says, I lended you a sella on the basis of that collateral, and it was worth a shekel, less, right? Half a sella. And the other individual, the debtor, says, that is not the case. Rather, you lended me a sella on the basis of the collateral, and the collateral is worth 3 dinars. So in between what you lent me and what you say the collateral is worth. So here the law is that the debtor is obligated to take an oath. Fundamentally, the obligation to take the oath is that of the borrower, as he is the one who responds to the creditor's claim with a partial admission. But the sages said, let the creditor take the oath to bolster his claim, lest this party take an oath, and then the other party, the creditor, produces the deposit. So after explaining this Mishnah from Tractate Shavuot, the Gemara analyzes its connection to our Mishnah that we're discussing here in chapter 3, Mishnah number 1 of Bava Metzia, meaning the statement of Rav Huna. But if the statement of Rav Huna is so, once the creditor takes an oath that the collateral is not in his possession, how can he produce it thereafter? And Rava said the Mishnah is referring to a case where there are witnesses that the collateral was burned. Therefore, the creditor need not take an oath that it is not in his possession. Remember that we started by saying that if I deposit something with you, and you're an unpaid bailee, and then it's stolen, and you don't want to swear an oath that it was stolen and it wasn't lost due to your negligence, you could just pay me. But even if you pay me, you have to take an oath that it is no longer in your possession. You don't have to take an oath that you weren't negligent, but you do have to take an oath that you're not actually holding the thing right now. And now we're comparing that to this creditor-debtor collateral law. Right, so the Gemara asks, if so, the question remains, why is the obligation to take the oath transferred from the debtor to the creditor? There is no concern that the creditor will produce the collateral. From where will he bring it if it was burned? So rather, Rav Yosef said the Mishnah is referring to a case where there are witnesses that the collateral was stolen. And the Gemara asks, well, ultimately in that case too, from where will the creditor bring the collateral if it was stolen? And the Gemara answers, although the collateral has been stolen, it's possible that the creditor will exert himself to locate the thief and bring the collateral. thereby proving that the debtor took a false oath as regards its value. The Gemara asks, if so, in a case where the creditor takes an oath as well, let the debtor exert himself and bring the collateral, thereby proving that the creditor took a false oath about its value. And the Gemara answers, this is unlikely. Granted, there is concern that the creditor will recover the stolen collateral as he knows who enters and exits his house, so he may have some inkling of the identity of the thief. And therefore he goes and exerts himself and brings the collateral. But with regard to the debtor, does he know who enters and exits the creditor's house? He has no inkling of who the thief might be. Abaye says, although the creditor takes an oath that the collateral is not in his possession, the obligation to take an oath for partial admission is transferred from the debtor to the creditor, as the sages issued a decree, lest the debtor take the oath for his partial admission, and then the creditor claim and say to him, I found the collateral after you took the oath. So Rav Ashi says this party, the creditor, takes an oath, and that party, the debtor, takes an oath. And this party, the creditor, takes an oath that the collateral is not in his possession. That's like our case of the unpaid bailee. And that party, the debtor, takes an oath as to how much the collateral was worth. And this is what the Mishnah is saying. Who takes an oath first? The creditor takes an oath first that the collateral is not in his possession, lest this party, meaning the debtor, take an oath and the other party, i.e. the creditor, produce the deposit. Rav Huna bar Tachlifa said, in the name of Rava, the first part of the latter clause of the Mishnah is a conclusive refutation of the opinion of Rav Huna, who said that the creditor is obligated to take an oath that the collateral is not in his possession. In that clause, the debtor said, you loaned me a sella on the basis of that collateral, and it turns out the collateral is worth 2 sella. So now you owe me a sella. And the other party, the creditor, said, that is not the case. Rather, I loaned you a sella on the basis of that collateral, and the collateral was worth a sella. So in this case, the creditor is exempt from payment. And if the statement of Rav Huna is so, once the creditor takes an oath that the collateral is not in his possession, let him also take an oath by means of an extension of an oath as to how much the collateral was worth, as one obligated to take an oath can be forced to take other oaths as well. And we learn that from the case of the Sota, right? She's going to have to take an oath that she did not cheat on her husband with this man that she was suspected of cheating on him with. And once she's taking an oath, she can actually be asked to say, and did you cheat on the husband with any other man? Right? Once she's taking an oath, she can be asked to take other oaths as well that normally would not apply. And likewise with the case of monetary matters. Rav Ashi said, I stated this law before Rav Kahana, and he said to me, let the law in the Mishnah be understood with regard to a case where the debtor trusts the creditor that the collateral is no longer in his possession. So he doesn't need to swear an oath that it's not in his possession. The Gemara challenges, but if so, let the debtor trust the creditor with regard to this matter of how much the collateral was worth. And the Gemara explains the creditor is not certain about the value of the collateral, as the item did not belong to him at the beginning of this exchange. And that is why the debtor does not rely upon him to take an oath concerning its value. And the Gemara challenges, but let the creditor trust the debtor, as the debtor is certain about the value of the collateral since it's his. And the Gemara answers, the creditor does not trust the debtor. The Gemara asks, and what is different so that the debtor trusts the creditor that the collateral is not in his possession, and what is different that the creditor does not trust the debtor to accurately assess the value of the collateral? And the Gemara answers, the debtor sees in the creditor fulfillment of the verse, the integrity of the upright shall guide them. Proverbs 11:3. He believes that God blesses the creditor with wealth to lend because he is an upright person. And the creditor sees in the debtor fulfillment of the end of the verse, but the perverseness of the faithless shall destroy them. And the creditor believes that God made the debtor poor because he is a deceitful person. Now, obviously, not all poor people are deceitful. Maybe not even the majority of poor people are deceitful. They didn't become poor because they were deceitful. It can happen for any number of reasons, including just bad luck. But this is why they're just tying to a biblical verse. Why, in that situation, the debtor might rely on the word of the creditor, but the creditor might not rely on the word of the debtor. New subject. The Gemara relates a certain man deposited jewels, the word for jewels in this context is kefe, with another. And when the period of the deposit was complete, the owner of the jewels said to the bailee, "Give me the jewels." And the bailee said to him in response, "I do not know where I placed them." The matter came before Rav Nachman, who said to the bailee, "Every circumstance where a bailee, right, a custodian, claims, 'I do not know where I placed them,' this is in and of itself negligence." If you don't know where you put the deposit, you are negligent. That is the definition of negligence. So go pay him for the jewels. But the bailee did not pay. So Rav Nachman went and gave instructions to repossess the palace of the bailee and sell it to pay for the jewels that he misplaced. Ultimately, not only were the jewels found, but they had also increased in value during this period. Rav Nachman said the jewels returned to their initial owner, and the palace returns to its owner. And the bailee does not profit from the increase in the value of the jewels. Rava said, I was sitting at that time studying before Rav Nachman, and our chapter of study was this chapter, one who deposits, which is relevant to this case. And I said to Rav Nachman, isn't this the case of a bailee who paid the owner and did not wish to take an oath? And it is the bailee who receives the double payment when a thief steals and then they recover the stolen merchandise from the thief, and the thief has to pay the double payment. Who does the thief pay? The bailee, who chose not to take an oath, and therefore he paid the owner of the deposit because he didn't want to take an oath. So the owner was made whole for his deposit. The bailee paid him. Then when the thief is caught and the merchandise is recovered, who gets that money? The worth of the compensation of that goes to the bailee, since he already paid off the owner. And the penalty payment, right, the double payment, the penalty of that, the penalty portion of that, also goes to the bailee because he paid off the owner. So is that the same? Are we going to say that that's why here in this situation, the owner of the palace who received a deposit of jewels and then lost the jewels, so his palace was sold out from under him in order to pay off the owner of the jewels, and then the jewels were found. So don't the jewels go to the owner, the former owner of the palace, right, who lost his building in order to pay off the owner of the jewels? So now when the jewels are found, doesn't their value go to the bailee? And the fact that the jewels appreciated in value because the market value went up, that will also go to the bailee, since he paid off the owner of the jewels that he lost. Right? Right? Are we going to say that these two things are comparable? And the answer is no. Right? So Rav said, and I said to Rav Nachman, isn't this the case of a bailee who paid off the owner and did not wish to take an oath? And it is the bailee who receives the double payment, ostensibly because once he paid, the owner transfers ownership of the item to him. And Rav Nachman didn't even answer me. And Rav Nachman did well that he did not answer me, as the question, my question, says Rava, was not worthy of an answer. And so Rav explains why his question was completely off base. What is the reason that Rav Nachman did not answer me? The reason is that the cases cannot be compared at all. There, in the case of the Mishna, the bailee paid at his own initiative. He didn't want to take an oath, so he paid. He did not inconvenience the owner by compelling him to go to court. Therefore, the owner transfers ownership of the deposit to the bailee. But here, in the case of the jewels in the palace, the bailee inconvenienced the owner and compelled him to go to court. Consequently, the owner does not transfer ownership of the deposit to the bailee. And when the jewels were finally found, they return to the owner. The owner will have to give back the money that he was given to compensate him for the jewels, but he keeps the jewels, and the fact that they went up in market value, he gets the benefit of that. The guy who owned the palace that was sold, he gets that money back, and hopefully he can repurchase his palace. Now the Gemara asks, is this to say that Rav Nachman holds that after property is repossessed in order to pay an unpaid debt, based on the court's appraisal of the article's value, It is returned if the debtor pays the debt. But the Gemara rejects that conclusion. In general, the item is not returned. But it is different there in the case of the jewels, as it was an erroneous appraisal, in that the jewels were in the possession of the bailee from the outset. He just didn't know where they were, but they were on his property, and he was merely unable to locate them temporarily. With regard to the reversal of an appraisal, the sages of Nehardea say, after property is repossessed in order to pay an unpaid debt, based on the court's appraisal of the article's value, it is returned to the debtor, provided that he repays the debt from the time of the appraisal until 12 months of the year have passed. After that, he can't get the property back. And a Maimar said, I am from Nehardea, and nevertheless I hold that repossession based on an appraisal of an article's value can always be returned, not just for 12 months. If the debtor pays his debt, he can reclaim his property at any point. And the Gemara rules, and the law is that repossession based on an appraisal can always be returned due to the fact that it is stated, and you shall do that which is right and good. Deuteronomy 6:18. So the owner of the property appreciates his property more than another person would. Therefore, once the debtor repays his debt to the creditor, legal formalism should not prevent return of the debtor's property. Right? In other words, if you borrow money and you gave collateral and then you didn't pay it back, right? And then they appraised the collateral, and then they said, okay, well, this will suffice to cover the debt, and the property now belongs to the lender. And then later, the debtor is able to raise the money in order to pay back the loan. Can he then get the property back, even though it was appraised and adjudged to be the property now of the lender? Answer, yes. He can always get his property back if he pays off the loan. Now, the Gemara clarifies related matters. It is obvious that if the court appraised property to repay a debt to a creditor, and this creditor went and had the property appraised and repaid his debt to his creditor, we say to the second creditor, right? In other words, somebody lent money and then didn't get the money. He didn't get the loan paid off. The person he lent it to never paid. So this guy keeps the collateral. Now, he himself borrowed money from someone else. Can he use that collateral to pay off the loan to someone else, right? Pass through collateral, as it were. And he repaid his debt to his creditor. So we would say to the second creditor, your rights are not superior to those of the man through whom you came to possess the property. Just as the first debtor can repay the debt and reclaim his property from his creditor, he can also reclaim the property from the creditor of his creditor. If a creditor who received appraised land sold it or bequeathed it to his heirs or gave it as a gift, the debtor then cannot reclaim the land from those who acquired their land. It is certain that from the outset, when those people acquired the land, it was with the intent to acquire the land itself that they descended to it, and it was not with the intent to receive money that they descended to the land. So if the court appraised property to repay a debt to a woman, and then she married, or if the court appraised property from a woman to repay her debt, and she then married and died, since the legal status of a husband with regard to his wife's property is that of a buyer, he does not return property that was appraised and repossessed to pay his wife's debt. And we do not return to him property that was repossessed from his wife if he pays her debt. And this is, as Rabbi Yosef Bar Chanina said, in Usha, the sages instituted that in the case of a woman who sold part of her usufruct property she brought into the marriage, and that her husband can, receive the produce of that field, let's say, while they're married, but if they divorce, she takes that field with her. That's usufruct property. In Usha, the sages instituted that in the case of a woman who sold part of her usufruct property during the life of her husband, and then she died, the husband repossesses the property from the purchasers, and the property belongs to the wife, while the profits accrued after marriage belong to the husband. Therefore, the woman does not have the right to sell the property as long as they are married. If she sold the property anyway, and then she died, and her husband is her heir, the sages instituted that his legal status is that of a buyer and not an heir. His rights to the land precede those of the subsequent buyers, and he repossesses the land and reimburses them the sale price of the property. Now we're on page 35b. With regard to a case where the debtor, not the court, authorized his creditor to repossess the land for his debt, and now he seeks to pay his debt and reclaim it. Rav Acha and Ravina disagree. One says, if he pays the debt, the repossession based on the appraisal is reversed, and he reclaims the land. And one says the repossession based on the appraisal is not reversed. Appraisal means that a court gets involved, appraises the property to see if it will pay off the debt that is the subject of the lawsuit. Now the Gemara elaborates, the one who says that the repossession based on the appraisal is not reversed holds that this is a full-fledged sale, as he authorized the repossession at his own initiative. Consequently, he cannot retract it. And the one who says that the repossession based on the appraisal is reversed holds that it is not a full-fledged sale. And the fact that he authorized the repossession at his initiative and did not wait to come to court for a ruling that his land be repossessed does not make it a full-fledged sale. It was only due to his desire to avoid embarrassment that he authorized the repossession. And the Gemara clarifies the laws of repossession. And when a creditor repossesses the debtor's land because he didn't pay the loan, from when does he consume the produce of that land? And Rabbah said he consumes the produce from the time when the document of authorization reaches his possession. This is a document that authorizes him to repossess the property of the debtor in payment of the debt wherever the property is located. And Abaye said he need not wait until he receives the document. Rather, the document's witnesses with their signatures acquire the debtor's land on his behalf. From the moment they sign the document, the land is his even before the document reaches his hands. And Rava said he consumes the produce of that land from the time when the days of proclamation conclude. After property belonging to the debtor is located, the court proclaims that the property will be auctioned to raise funds to repay the debt. Therefore, even after the document of authorization reaches him, the creditor is not entitled to the produce, as someone else may purchase it. If the creditor enters the highest bid, then he is entitled to the produce. And that concludes our discussion of Mishnah number 1 here in chapter 3. Here comes Mishnah number 2. In the case of one who rents a cow from another, okay, so let's say that I rent a cow from you, okay, you own a cow, I rent it, so I'm paying you for the use of the cow. And this renter then lends it to another person. So I rented the cow from you, I paid you a fee, I'm holding the cow that I rented from you. You are the owner, I am the renter. Now I have a neighbor, Reuven, who really needs a cow, so he borrows it from me. I rent it from you, he borrows from me, right? So he has maximum liability because if anything happens to a cow while it's borrowed, yet the borrower has to pay. I have heightened liability, but not total liability because you are receiving benefit from me using your cow. I'm paying you for that, right? So what happens? I rent it from you, Reuven borrows it from me, and then the cow dies while Reuven is holding it. But it dies not because Reuven was negligent or because it was stolen, but rather it dies in its typical manner, i.e. of natural causes, while in the possession of the borrower. So in that situation, the borrower is liable because it died while a borrower is always liable. The renter is not liable because if I rent the cow from you and then it dies of natural causes, well, it would have died of natural causes whether it was in your possession or mine. So I don't owe you the value of the cow. But the borrower does owe. So who does he owe it to? Sounds like, since I'm the renter and I don't owe you for a cow that died of natural causes, but he's the borrower and he does have to pay for a cow that dies of natural causes, who ends up with the value of the cow? I do. Or do I? So says the Mishnah, and the cow dies in its typical manner, i.e. of natural causes, while in the possession of the borrower. Then the renter takes an oath to the borrower, to the owner of the cow, that the cow died in its typical manner, right? I take an oath that that's what happened. And the borrower pays the renter. He pays me for the cow that he borrowed. A renter is exempt in a case of damage due to circumstances beyond his control, including death due to natural causes. But a borrower is liable to compensate the owner even for damage due to circumstances beyond his control. So that's what the unattributed Mishna says. However, Rabbi Yosei says, how does the other party, i.e. the renter, do business with and profit from another's cow? I mean, like, all I did is pay for a rental fee, and now I'm going to receive the full value of the cow for something that I never owned? Rabbi Yosei says it can't be, right? How does the renter do business with and profit from another person's cow? Rather, the value of the cow should be returned to the owner. The renter need not take an oath, but the borrower must compensate the owner of the cow because you got lucky, right? If it's in my possession as a renter, then you wouldn't get the value of the cow. But because I lent it to somebody who as a borrower needs to pay for it, that money is going to flow directly to you, the owner of the cow, and you will be compensated. You're lucky that I lent out the cow in these circumstances. That's according to Rabbi Yosei, and in fact, the law is according to Rabbi Yosei. That's the Mishnah. Now the Gemara. Rav Idi bar Avin said to Abaye, after all, with regard to the renter, with what does he acquire this cow to the extent that one who borrows the cow from him is liable to compensate him if it dies? He acquires it with an oath that he took to the owner of the cow that the cow, in fact, died of natural causes. And so the Gemara asks, but since the acquisition is affected by the renter's oath, let the one who rented his animal for hire say to the renter, meaning you, the owner, say to me, remove yourself and remove your oath. I do not want to deal with you at all in this case. I don't want to hear your oath. I will litigate with the borrower to recover my cow. And Abaye said to Rav Idi bar Avin, do you hold that it is with an oath that the renter acquires the cow? That is not so. As from the moment of the cow's death, the renter acquires the cow. From the moment that the cow dies in the possession of the borrower, the renter has the right to receive another cow in exchange. And this oath that the renter takes to the owner of the cow is not required by the law. Rather, he takes an oath to alleviate the concerns of the owner so that the owner will not suspect him of negligence. Consequently, the owner of the cow cannot litigate with the borrower, and even if he waives his right to demand an oath from the renter, he is unable to receive a cow from the borrower. That's according to this view. Rabbi Zera says, according to the law in the Mishnah, there are times when the owner pays several cows to the renter. This is going to be one of these extreme hypotheticals that would never happen, but just so that we test our understanding of the law. What are the circumstances? In a case where the renter rented a cow from him for 100 days. Your cow, I'm renting it for a period of 100 days. And the owner of the cow then borrowed that cow from the renter. So I rented it from you for 100 days, so now it's in my possession. You can't get it back for 100 days. But you need your cow. So you come to me and say, can you borrow the cow? You're the owner, but now you're borrowing it from me because as the renter, I have legal possession of it for the next 100 days. So now you borrow it from me. The owner of the cow then borrows it from the renter, and you borrowed it for 90 days. So now it's in your possession officially for 90 days. And then I, the renter, rented the cow from you. Right? So I rented it from you. You borrowed it from me. I'm renting it from you again. I'm renting it from you for a period of 80 days. And then you borrowed it again from me for a period of 70 days. And that cow died within that 70-day period of its borrowing. Right? So borrowing or rented, that was borrowed, that was rented, right? So we're creating a new relationship each time. Then for each and every occasion of borrowing of the cow, the owner, who then became the borrower, owes one cow. And a borrower always owes. He has to replace what he borrowed if it died while in his possession. Since there were two discrete acts of borrowing and two discrete acts of rental, the owner owes the renter 4 cows, 2 outright as compensation for the borrowed cows that died, and 2 cows for the renter to use for the duration of his rental periods, which then presumably I would return to you. Rav Acha of Difti said to Ravina concerning this law, after all, it is 1 cow. and he introduced it into one legal status and removed it from another legal status. He removed it from the status of rental and he introduced it into the status of borrowing. He removed it from the status of borrowing and he introduced it into the status of rental. How then does the owner pay multiple cows for one cow? And Ravina said to Rav Acha, and is this cow intact so that the owner could say to the renter, here is your cow? Since the borrower cannot return the cow to the creditor, he is liable to return that which he committed to return. And he committed to return 2 cows, not 1. And Mar Bar Rav Ashi, and I'm almost done, so questions or comments, please get them in now. So Mar Bar Rav Ashi said a third opinion. The renter has against the owner only a claim of 2 cows, one for the borrowing done by the owner, and one for fulfillment of his rental agreement. And this is because the category of borrowing is 1, and the category of rental is 1. And as for the cow that is repayment for the borrowing, the renter acquires it completely. And as for the one for the rental, he works with it for the duration of its rental period, and then he returns it to the owner. Somehow I'm reminded of I'm My Own Grandpa. For those who remember that old song. Okay, that's where we'll leave off and just take a few questions on Bava Metzia 35. It says, Bill, worth noting, the sages don't hear comment on the validity of the creditor's belief that the debtor might be deceitful. They just mentioned that the creditor might hold this view, just so. Sharon, so if a borrower needs 1 dinar and leaves his jacket with the lender as collateral, what difference does it make if the collateral is worth more than the amount borrowed? The difference is if the collateral is lost. Right? If the collateral is lost, then forgiving the debt isn't going to make the borrower whole because the jacket that he deposited as collateral was a bigger loss than merely is not made up for not having to pay back. Right? So a $200 jacket that was held as collateral for a $100 loan, and then the creditor loses the jacket. So now the creditor can say, I forgive the loan, but now, that means that I got a $200 jacket for $100. Now, I don't have the jacket, it's lost, but that's why the borrower is going to say, hey, that was a $200 jacket. I swear it was a $200 jacket. And now you have to pay me the $100 difference because you lost my jacket. Right. Now, Bell, what about the purchaser of the palace? Presumably the sale was a judicial sale. So there wouldn't have been underhanded, they wouldn't have been underhanded about this sale. Right, there's nothing underhanded there. I think the problem is that they sold the palace to pay off the jewels and then the jewels were found. The guy who bought the palace, he was just buying a palace. He doesn't care why it was being sold. The fact that it was being sold to pay off a debt, why is he now going to lose his palace? He bought a palace fair and square. But it seems like we would say this was a lien, and there would have had to have been some disclosure at the time of purchasing the palace that it was being sold to pay off, these missing jewels, and therefore the purchaser would understand if the jewels were found, he might have to give back the palace. He would get his money back, but he might have to give up the palace. And then you could ask, what if he improved the palace in the meantime? That's another question. Lucy, but how would the renter know for sure that the cow died of natural causes while in the borrower's possession? He wasn't there. Who knows what really happened? Very good. Very good. Presumably the borrower has to swear. Well, the borrower doesn't have to swear anything because he owes a cow. So if he can't produce the cow that he had, then he has to replace the cow. The renter, you're exactly right. The renter is excused from giving the owner the value of the cow only if it died of natural causes. So the renter is going to have to make sure that that's what happened so that he is excused from returning the cow. And so presumably he would investigate that by, finding out from the borrower. The borrower doesn't have to swear an oath, the renter does. But with that oath, the owner can say, I don't want to hear the renter's oath. I just want a new cow. I want my cow back. And if the borrower owes you a cow, let the borrower owe me a cow, right? And that is what Rabbi Yosef says. That's where the law comes out. That's what I've got for us today. And with God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow, Thursday, at the regular time, 6 p.m. Pacific. Have a great night.